Fromm, again, proves very helpful here when he demystifies the larger purpose of human reason, this unique human capacity. In his book, Man for Himself, he says that the function of reason is, and I quote, to know, to understand, to grasp, to relate oneself to things by comprehending them. It penetrates through the surface of things in order to discover their essence, their hidden relations, and their deeper meanings, their reason, end quote. In other words, reason is interested in knowledge, not just true belief, as the philosophers will tell us is insufficient, but justified true belief, a belief that is true, that we have a relationship to, such that we can articulate it, that we understand it. Speaking concretely, to think critically is to think in a coherent or consistent manner. Our statements of belief should be, at least, at a bare minimum, logically possible, which is to say that they should at least be imaginably true. And this seems like a really low standard that like nobody is going to be able to miss. And the sad thing is that everybody in this room, before the day is over, will likely violate this basic thought law. When our statements of belief entail a logical contradiction, they're logically impossible. They are, by definition, false. Despite claims to the contrary, some things are actually impossible. It's logically impossible that I'm in Florida with you right now, but I'm also in Texas. And don't give me this about like somebody else is my twin brother, it's a hologram. I'm talking about me. I'm here right now and I'm not in Texas. I can't be in both places at the same time. It's impossible for LeBron James to be better or worse than himself in basketball. For Bill Blatsky, whoever the heck that is, to have been killed by Eric Reed, whoever the heck that is, even though Eric Reed doesn't exist. Those are just impossibilities. For you to live in a democracy wherein the public exercises no decision-making power in choosing elected leaders. Each of these are literal absurdities, not the absurdities that we typically speak about, which basically amount to people who don't agree with us. That's absurd because I don't agree with your conclusion. They violate the basic law of non-contradiction, something we can at least all theoretically get behind, whatever our political ideological persuasion is. The principle that dictating that contradictory statements, you're up but you're down, you're in but you're out, you're perfect but you're flawed, it's entirely delicious but it's also just a little bit terrible, are necessarily false. They're literally irrational or illogical statements. They're absurd. Now the point here is that our beliefs carry the weight of logical implications that must be accounted for as we think and communicate. It's easy to speak over here in this one way and to ignore that thought when it's inconvenient when we're having this conversation over here. It's very complicated if we're interested in what Emerson highlights, which is integrity, which is something that all of us can only strive for but will never quite perfectly achieve. If existence is necessary for doing anything in the world, then the moment we know that Eric Reed has never existed, we immediately know that he's never killed anyone. And since democracy is an idea that means that the right of the public to exercise decision-making power and choosing their elected leaders, to speak of a society where the public doesn't have those fundamental rights is not to speak of a flawed democracy, it's not to speak of a democracy at all. To think critically, we must acknowledge and resolve contradictions. It's true that the dog fighting, for example, is morally repugnant, but why? Not just because society says so, not just because you got a dog, but because it requires an incomparable sacrifice from a sensitive, thinking, feeling being subjected to gruesome violence only to entertain human beings. Then it's also going to be true that slaughtering pigs for food is also morally repugnant, since it requires an incomparable sacrifice from sensitive, thinking beings subjected to gruesome violence to satiate taste buds, but not the nutritional needs of human beings, given its link to, heart disease, which is the #1 killer in our country.